another My Week With video. So this week I've been driving the 2022 Mazda MX-5 Miata. And I absolutely love the ND2 Miatas. I already did a full review on a 2019, both the RF and the regular soft top. I'm so impressed with this new engine that they introduced a few years back. And so I'm always looking for an excuse to drive a Miata. And so whenever I heard about the new changes for 2022 here, I thought it was a great excuse to spend another week with a Miata. So the one big thing that actually might improve the driving experience here for 2022 is that the Miatas now have what's called Kinematic Posture Control. And it's essentially like a torque vectoring type thing with a brake-based thing where it brakes the inside rear wheel there to help, on turn in and eliminate body roll a little bit. I'm going to test it out on some back roads here. I have already been driving this vehicle for 133 miles, but I'll kind of illustrate and talk more about that new feature in a minute. But the things that I love about the Miata still remain. It is still just so much fun, and since I just got out of a GR86 last week, I'm able to now, compare it to its newest competition, and really its only competition, honestly, these days, with the GR86 and the new BRZ. And so, what I can say about what I like better about this and what I like better about the GR86, first off, the transmission is certainly a little bit better, in my opinion, here in the Miata. The shifter is just a little slicker with its shifts, and it just feels a little bit better to use, in my opinion. And that, combined with the fact that you have faster throttle response than what you have in the GR86 and the BRZ, where those cars almost feel like they have a little bit of rev hang compared to just how fast this is. Now, the GR86 and BRZ are great by modern standards and are very quick with their throttle response, but this just made it a little easier to rev match my downshifts, and it was just a little bit more eager with that throttle response, even more so than the GR86, which was cranked up even beyond the BRZ. And the gearing is also nice and short, so that you really feel like you're working hard and you're accelerating a lot, but then you look down and you're still, you're going quickly. It's a lot faster than the models before the ND2 here, but still isn't super fast, but it gives you the sensation of speed that you don't get quite as much of in the GR86 and the BRZ, where you feel like you're going really quick and you look down and it's actually slower. So it means that you can have fun even at the speed limit speed. You can still have fun and feel like you're really working hard and having a blast. And so I think that whole driving a slow car fast mentality is even stronger here in this than it is in the GR86 and the BRZ. Again, very similar, but in this I just feel like I can even drive this a little bit harder than those cars. Obviously those cars have a little bit more power than this does, but 0 to 60 time is within a few tenths of a second between the two cars. So it's not like this is really much slower than those, honestly, but it's just the fact that the way they set up the 6-speed and everything, it means that it really allows you to really engage in the driving experience very well. But it's not all good as far as this compared to the GR86, because what I've really found is that even though this still has skinny tires, it doesn't want to drift as much as the GR86 and the BRZ. Again, that could be a byproduct of the fact that this has less power than those do. And it will drift, it's just that you really have to provoke it a lot more, and it just feels like the car doesn't want to do it. It's a little closer to the BRZ in the way that it feels, but even the BRZ is a little more tail happy. But the GR86, the way they tuned that thing just absolutely loves sliding. It's very progressive and easy to control the slides. And I feel like the Miata's fighting you a little bit more, and it doesn't want to really do that. And part of that might also be because of the kinematic body control thing, but I think it's really just the way they set up the suspension, the traction control system, and all of that in order to really limit, any of that. But even if you turn stuff off, it still just is set up to not want to slide as much. But we're coming up the corners I always take here in my reviews, and let's see how the Miata handles now with this new kinematic body control or posture control. And so, I've already been down this road once before in this car, and I've driven on a lot of back roads in my week here with the Miata to really feel out this, these changes here. And what I can say is that it certainly makes an improvement. It's interesting. So there's like this helping hand, like mid-corner, that feels like it kind of comes in and gives you better than expected, turn in, and just allows the nose to tuck in a little bit better than I'm expecting, what I'm used to in ND2 Miatas. So it feels a little artificial. I don't think it feels overly fake or annoys me in any way, but I certainly can feel it. I'd have to drive the ND2 back to back, the pre-2022 one, to truly say. But I will say that it does make it feel a little more agile. and just, you know, a little more competent in corners, and I think it does quell the body roll a tiny bit. You still have a little bit of lean. It still isn't quite as flat as the GR86 and the BRZ, and it's obviously not as stiff of a structure being a convertible and all of that. So, you know, it's a little more flexy than what you get with the GR86 and stuff, but it's better. I do think it actually is a noticeable improvement. It's a worthwhile thing. Now, if you have a 2019, you know, I don't think that it's probably worth, you know, jumping up to a 2022 for that feature. It's certainly nice to have though. So, you know, if you're someone who's on the fence about getting one of these, or if you're in an ND1 or earlier Miata and, you know, you're considering one of these, you know, maybe it's worth spending the few extra bucks for the 2022, because this kind of is a nice little cherry on top. That kind of incentivizes, you know, getting a 2022 over one of the prior years, especially with used car prices being as high as they are these days. Almost anything you're better off buying new these days. But even if we weren't in the crazy used car pricing we are in here in 2022, I still think, you know, this could be a nice extra incentive to go for the 2022s here. So, I mean, I really like it. I still think, you know, the Miata's key fundamental characteristics are still here, though. It still is a 2,400 pound super lightweight thing, and that is also a key difference between this and the GR86 and the BRZ. I mean, those are almost 500 pounds heavier, you know, for their curb weights, and so, you know, it does feel different. You know, this certainly has, it's a smaller feeling car. It's a little more flickable in corners. You feel that it's a lighter car. And so, I mean, does it feel 500 pounds lighter than the GR86? I don't think it feels that drastic in the change of weight there, but I would say it does feel a couple hundred pounds lighter for sure. And that's also exaggerated by this light steering that you have in the NDs, which I really like, because it really also adds to that darty nature of really being willing to dive in. It's not fighting you or anything. It just feels very agile as a result, but it's nicely weighted steering at the same time, even though it is lighter, but it just feels really well done. And you know, but the steering is also great in the GR86 and the BRZ too. I also love revving out this engine. I mean, you know, the GR86 and the BRZ have a similarly high red line, but this having the lighter flywheel they added in 2019 means that it actually feels like it revs up a little bit faster even than the GR86 and the BRZ. I really love that light flywheel. I think that also really helps as far as the shifter is concerned, and that is another reason why I think this shifter feels a little bit better than the BRZ and the GR86. But the only other thing to mention about the 2022s, in addition to the Kinematic Posture Control that's new, is you also have some new paint colors. You have this polymetal gray color that this one's in. There's also a new like creamy white you can get now on these. There's also Napa leather as an option, which is great. Also, 2022 Miatas now also get wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto, and it worked pretty well during the week. The only complaints that I had with it were that there was a couple of times where it took a while to connect, or it would disconnect while I was using it, but that was pretty rare, and most of the time it did work. The only other thing I didn't like about it is that the touchscreen functionality only works whenever you're stopped. Whenever you're moving, you still have to use the controller wheel, which is not user-friendly with the Apple interface. But aside from that, you know, still very nice to have that smartphone integration here for 2022. So yeah, but overall, you know, I think these Miatas are still an absolute blast. Now, you know, the only other thing I will say is that, you know, there's a little bit of a price premium here now for the Miata compared to the GR86 and the BRZ, because they were able to keep the pricing on those cars just nice and low. And so, you know, as far as the Miata and what might make it worth a little bit of extra money, you know, you have the lighter weight, the much lighter weight than the GR86 and the BRZ. You have the convertible experience, which is something you can't get in those, and it's a very different, unique experience that I really love, by the way. I have to add that, you know, convertibles, yeah, you know, not only is it the wind in your hair kind of thing that's fun, but it's also a more relaxing drive. Even whenever you're not revving it out hard, you know, whenever you're just cruising along, you hear more of the ambient noise around you, you know, nature and just everything around you, you know, you can take in better, and it just gives me a real zen feeling. I was driving whenever the sun was going down a few nights back, and there was no traffic. I was just hearing nature around me, and it's just like, it's just unmatched. You don't get, you know, that kind of an immersion experience with nature whenever you're driving a hardtop. And so there's something to really be said for that extra experience you do get here with a convertible in the Miatas. So you are paying a little bit of a premium for that as well. But I also have to add, the Miata interior materials do feel a little bit nicer and more premium. Everything feels a little more solid in here, a little bit more expensive than what you're going to be getting in the GR86 and the BRZ. You also get a Bose stereo versus just the premium stereo you get in the BRZ and the GR86. And so, you know, there's a few extra things there in addition to the convertible and stuff that I think, you know, makes this still justifiable from a price standpoint. But that's really the last thing. That and fuel economy are the last things I have to mention. First, we'll briefly touch on fuel economy, which is also very impressive. So, over my now 140 miles of driving here in the Miata, I've been averaging 33.1 mpg, and I hardly did any highway driving. This was mostly spirited backroads driving, and then just commuting, running errands, that kind of stuff. And I'm getting 33.1 mpg, which is really mind-blowing to me, considering especially these are rated at 26 in the city, 34 on the highway, and 29 combined. I'm doing 4 mpg over the combined figure. And if you watch any of my other reviews or my week with videos, I typically get 1 to 2 mpg less than the city rating. So I could have gotten 24 to 25 and I would have been totally fine with that. To be getting 33 in this car is remarkable. Now, the GR86 and the BRZ in my weeks also did outperform their EPA estimates, and I was getting about 25 mpg in those. But that's another big factor. If, you know, I'm doing essentially the same kind of driving in this and in those, and I'm getting 8 better mpg in this. These times we're living in with expensive gas prices, 8 mpg better can add up quick. And so that could kind of offset the little bit of a price premium you get here with the Miatas. But, you know, just really impressed with that fuel economy. And this is another car where it seems like the EPA has very much underrated the fuel economy potential of the Miatas for some reason. And the last thing to mention is the pricing here of these. So, the clubs here, which are the ones that give you the limited slip diff, which is what you're going to want if you're an enthusiast, you know, they're going to be starting around $32,000. Now, yes, you can get a sport model without the limited slip diff. Still has the same grade engine, same grade transmission, most of the same grade interior. You know, those still are only about $27,500, $28,000. An absolute incredible bargain, especially if you just want, you know, more relaxed convertible experience. You know, there's nothing wrong with those, but again, having the limited slip diff, I think you're really going to want to go for that $32,000 club like this one. And so even at that $32,000 price point, you know, for a club, which by the way, those clubs still have cloth seats, you're going to be, you know, basically at the same price or maybe even slightly over the pricing of a premium BRZ or the limited BRZ or the GR86 Premium. Basically the top trims, which they did confusingly with Toyota and Subaru. But anyway, their top trims, you know, which have heated seats like this does and have all those features, you know, those are right around 32 as well. So it's very comparable whenever you're just comparing those back to back. This one, though, isn't as competitive because, you know, this gives you some stuff that you can't get in the GR86 and the BRZ, admittedly. So this one has the BBS Recaro Brembo package, which is $4,500, gives you Brembo brakes, Recaro seats, and these very nice BBS wheels. Obviously, you know, since there is no comparable package currently on the GR86 and the BRZ, I can't really compare it to those, but it's just worth noting that this car as tested is $37,000. And, you know, I mean, the brakes are great if you plan to do a bunch of track driving, but it's a Miata. I don't think you need massive brakes on it. These Recaro seats I'm not in love with either. They're Alcantara, which doesn't breathe as well as cloth, and isn't as comfortable as leather in my opinion. You know, and these seats are also stiffer than the regular Miata seats, so I don't really love these Recaro seats either. The BBS wheels are fine, but that's easy to fix and pick out your own set of wheels if you want. So I personally would never go for the BBS Recaro Brembo package for $4,500. So if I were to get one of these, it probably would be about 32. But, you know, this one as tested is $37,000 with all that stuff on it. And then if you were to go for the RF, if you want to have, you know, the actual hardtop kind of experience, but still have the convertible with that RF, it's a very cool combo, although I still prefer the soft top over the RF. But if you want those, you know, a loaded RF's like 40 grand now, and even just a club RF, which doesn't have that package on it, is still about $36,000 or so, and again puts you, you know, several thousand over where you're going to be at in the GR86 and the BRZ. So it's hard to justify. If you stick to just a base club, you know, or a base model, there's a good value play there. But once you get to these higher ones, I feel like the value isn't quite as strong, and the Miata gets a little less appealing at 40 grand, you know, than it is whenever it's, you know, 30 or 32. But I also don't want to complain too much about pricing, because the Miatas, historically are priced at a really competitive figure, because I actually was doing some research for my NB2 Miata review that I'm going to be posting here in a couple of weeks, and I'll be including a link above if you're watching this later, whenever that video has gone live already. But I was doing the research for that, and those back then in 2001, a Miata's starting price was at like $21,500, which, accounting for inflation in 2022 dollars, would come out to roughly about $35,000. And a loaded up Miata with options, which, by the way, the options back then were like ABS and having, you know, stiffer springs and stuff. Even with those options, you know, it'd be about 40 grand back then for a Miata. So honestly, the fact that you can get a Miata for under 35 with all the extra tech, all the extra safety equipment, the nicer materials, the way nicer materials compared to 20 years ago. I mean, it's crazy how much nicer this feels than the older cars. You know, but you get all these improvements for basically the same money whenever you account for inflation, or even slightly less money. And I don't know how Mazda's managed to do it, to be perfectly honest. So from that standpoint, it's still an incredible value. And I mean, you know, they sold 500,000 of these things by 2001, even at those higher price points. So now the Miata is cheaper than ever, faster than ever, nicer than ever, safer than ever, more high-tech than ever, and it's cheaper than ever, really. So I mean, it's very impressive the way that they kept the pricing in check with these Miatas as well, even though, again, it is a little bit higher than the GR86 and the BRZ. I still think is a fantastic enthusiast value. If you're someone who doesn't need to have a drag racer, you don't need to have the fastest thing on the block, you know, I think the Miatas offer so much fun per dollar still. Just got to be careful with those options. But anyway, that's it as far as all of my thoughts here on the 2022 Miata. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Huge thanks to Mazda for providing me here with the MX-5 Miata to review for you guys today. And yeah, thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.